Yes, record to the, there we go. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our LIRT virtual coffee hour. Today we are joined by Ilana Stonebraker, who's the head of business SPEA library and head social sciences and social sciences department at IU Libraries in Bloomington. She has authored 25 peer-reviewed scholarly articles, most about business information literacy instruction, and served 2024-2025 as president of ALA RUSA, Reference and User Services Association, a division of the American Library Association. This spring, she received the Brass Excellence in Business Librarianship Award. Yay! Ilana holds a Master of Science in Information with a specialization in Library and Information Services, Preservation of Information from the University of Michigan, and a bachelor's degree in History from the University of Washington. All right, so take it away.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for coming today. I'll say what's on. I got some coffee specifically because it's coffee hour in terms of it. I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, so I'm usually up at like 5. So my coffee's usually earlier, but now I've got one today as well. And I just want to thank again the committee for inviting me. This is super fun. And I'm happy to be here in terms of it. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me see, or hang on, I'm going to first jump and start my presentation over here and then share my screen as is, as is the way, right? One second. I'm having a surprising amount of, let's see, there we go. Okay. I gotta move my little Zoom thing over, is what I got from that. One second. All right, so I'm gonna share my screen. All right, people seeing my slides? Good. Okay, cool. Sweet.
Good.
All right, so I'm really excited to present to you guys because I actually haven't presented this anywhere else. This is a project that I've been working on for the last 4 years, and I'd love to get your guys' feedback or if you're working on similar projects. And so this is going to be too big for one shots, too complicated for videos, insights and best practices from Train the Trainer programs. So this is going to cover some work that's specifically focused on business, but I think is really applicable to a lot of different areas. So I already kind of introduced myself, but there's a little bit about me. So I've been a business librarian my whole career in terms of it. Actually, I started when I was a history major in terms of it, because we were talking about history awards right before this, working at a business library. So I counted those. And so I've been in now 4 different business libraries. That's like my area, that's my jam. And I write a lot about business information literacy. I've done a little bit about how students use information in groups for group projects. And I do a lot of looking right now at the AACSB accreditation, which is the chief accrediting body for business schools, and some of the ways that libraries interact with that. So that's a little bit about me. This is a little bit about the Business SPIA Library. So the Business SPIA Library, which is a separate branch library here at IU Bloomington, is here's a picture of our front doors. So we have 2 librarians, so me and another librarian. We have 2 full-time staff. We get about 500,000 people in our space throughout the year. So it's a active library space, and it's predominantly about collaboration. So we have 14 reservable group collaboration type rooms, and we predominantly support the Kelley School of Business at the university, as well as the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs. So that's sort of the area that we tend to focus in terms of it. So what is a train the trainer in terms of it? And I'm really super excited that one of your previous presenters was Jane Hammonds, because this actually builds a lot on her work. Like her whole jam is faculty focused information literacy. So this is a quote from her in terms of it. So a faculty focused or teach the teachers. She doesn't prefer train the trainers because it's too corporate. I work in business, so corporate is good, I guess. Um, which librarians spend a significant amount of time developing, implementing, or supporting faculty development activities or initiatives that are intended to teach faculty how to teach IL. So it's specifically taking a response of being really faculty focused and focusing on their needs to in order to specifically teach information literacy. So that's what we're going to kind of focus on in terms of it. Some examples of different train the trainers that exist. A lot of institutions have faculty development grants. So a grant to make a class more information rich in some way. And so we have one of those here at IU Bloomington. Oftentimes there's also faculty development workshops. So partnering with a teaching and learning center to do that sort of work. Some places like Jane Hammond's do credentials for instructors. So either credit bearing or certificate focused things. And then also, and this is kind of what I kind of have done is training for faculty in a specific department. So the example that I found in the literature is oftentimes for English composition instructors, librarians might do a train the trainer about information literacy opportunities just because of the high focus on IL in those programs, right? So that's kind of the environment that we're sort of working in. So here's a little bit about my kind of specific situation. So originally, the Kelley School of Business had about 5,000 students in it. So a very large program. And there were two required courses that we worked with, C104, which is business presentations, and C204, which was business writing. So required courses for Kelley School of Business. Both classes had IL related, um, like they had information literacy as sort of an objective for the department. And both had these assignments that were tied to real world case examples. So a case example is where a class partners with a real company and they use that company as like they that writes the case essentially, and then the students look at it. So for a long time for C104, the case involved Target and then Macy's as large companies. And then for C204, it was always a small startup company from that was Ernest and Young was the partner and they would choose a project. So originally, so we had these big classes and we scaffolded the classes. So for C104, which was the class that was much more introductory, we did class visits. So we'd come into the class visits before that. We actually had a pre-assignment and in terms of it. So we had a pre-assignment. And so we'd come up before that assignment and present. And then we did videos for the case assignment. And then we did C204 assignment design. So we were on the team making the assignment. So we got to decide if it was researchable or not. And then we did videos for those cases. So we did a set of 3 videos to sort of deal with this situation in terms of it. So the model stopped working because our business school doubled in size over a period of about 10 years. So that number I gave you was in 2014 when they first started making these changes. And by 2020, we had 94 sections of that class, right? So it was really super big. So there are now 10,000 undergraduates in the Kelley School of Business. And we don't have any more librarians, right? So we still have the same amount of folks, right? And then the case assignment changed every semester, specifically for C204, but C104, they've changed the client a couple of times. So it meant that we had to create new videos every semester, which they got a lot of use in terms of it. I'm just going to see what the chat is. Fewer librarians. Yeah,
Good.
yeah. Also true. In terms of it, yeah, fewer librarians is also, yeah, something that's also happened. So the case assignment changed in terms of every semester. So the videos had a good amount, but there was lower video usage for C204 versus 104. So we had almost entirely one-to-one use. So like I said, every semester we had about 2,000 students. We had about 2,500 views or something like that of the videos for 204. For 104, we had maybe about half that or a quarter of that. So we just weren't getting buy-in in terms of it. So we started looking at, well, we've tried the technological solution, right? The videos, and now let's look at some other solutions that might work, is how we ended up that way. So we started this new model in 2022. And so this might be helpful if you guys are in similar unscalable environments as well. So librarians sit on assignment committees for both cases. So we are on the committees for creating the cases, which they were happy to do because they kind of understand that they don't have the full picture. So we took an equity argument towards class visits for C104, which is something that I think I've never done before and I think is nice. So we only visit classes for instructors that have been teaching for 4 semesters or less. For this is about 15 sections a semester. And to the faculty, we give, as opposed to saying like, we're not going to go into your classes at all, you're completely unscalable, we've taken the response of an equity argument, which gives us more agility to respond to instructors who need it most. So most instructors have been, of which we have about 20 instructors, 25 instructors for this class or something like that. People are really understanding of, oh, my colleagues need it more. We're focused on this in terms of it. So we do still, and this is nice because people who are new, like in their first semester of teaching the class, are the most likely to email us 3 days in advance to be like, I just realized I need this really a whole lot. And so this gave us a lot more agility to respond to those needs, and be like, yeah, of course we'll come into your class, versus before when we're like, everyone needs to fill out the form at the beginning of the semester, right? So it gives us a lot more ability to actually meet that need. We created a Canvas module versus videos for C104, just because it's much easier than videos. And like I said, we weren't getting our access, our money's worth, I guess, in terms of it. The C204 videos have continued, so we still make videos for them due to the strong buy-in we already had from the instructors. So we still make some videos, but we make half the videos we did before. And as part of this, and sort of as a sort of afterthought, we decided we were going to do this train the trainer idea. So we told the instructors, like, we're not going to go into your classes anymore. We're going to offer a session, I think we did like, most of these were an hour and a half to 2 hour sessions, to talk about how you can implement this stuff in your course. And so we originally did it for C104, so the class that we were no longer going into. But then C204, the business writing class, was like, no, we actually really think this is helpful. Can you do it for us too? And so we're like, yeah, sure. And so we did a train the trainer for that group as well. And then we did one for both groups, but with a focus on group work specifically. So what IL related stuff, most because we've been interested in group work. Like I said, that's a focus. So we had some findings for them in terms of it. So those are kind of the 3 flavors that we did. So changing this from a one-shot environment to a train the trainer environment, I think really required me to think a little bit differently about how I was approaching the topic. And so these are a couple of things that I think are different for train the trainer, as you sort of think about doing something for one of your classes as well. So in a one-shot environment, the librarian is really functioning as the search expert, right? Like they're the expert in the topic. But now the librarian is acting as an expert colleague in kind of a pedagogical manner, right? In a one-shot environment, there's a lot of focus on reinforcing instructor. I have some examples from some previous research I did on the importance of reinforcing an instructor as being part of a one-shot environment. This is more about supporting the instructor. A one shot is very focused on relevance to students, like trying to make it like this will help your class. This is what you need to know to do your assignment. Versus a train the trainer is more about connecting to various different theories or ideas in order to increase the possibility that the instructor will kind of see opportunities for it. there's a difference in being really direct to students versus resources to explore. And then a benefit, but also kind of a hard thing about this is one shots are one and done, right? Like you do it, you've completed it, it's over. But this really, since instructors tend to teach the class sometimes every semester, multiple semesters, this becomes much more of an ongoing conversation with each instructor with where they're at in terms of how they think about information literacy, which I think is a very different way of thinking about teaching information literacy if it's an ongoing conversation about, like, okay, so this is where you're at in your work, and then maybe you're thinking about, well, what about this idea or this type of assignment in the future? So that's something I think about. Um, Something that I noticed about the literature is there's a lot of, maybe imagined or not imagined focus on whether or not librarians who don't always have in-class experience can train faculty on topics in terms of it. And I found this great article that came out this last year about academic librarians and the art of faculty development. So this is a couple of reasons why librarians can do this, even if you haven't taught credit-bearing courses yourself. So you're not a pedagogical expert, right? So a couple of things are that librarians work with students for multiple years, giving librarians a longitudinal perspective on student learning. And so students often become quite candid with librarians, and this prepares librarians well for teacher-centered faculty development. Academic librarians typically bring together teams to amass the expertise needed for a project. So they're well versed in how to find specific expertise needed from the campus or the library and turn that into action. I'm kind of reading from her paper, actually. This sets them up for gathering groups or colleagues together to support all sorts of learning. So librarians are good at this sort of faculty development. And then the top reason she talked about is that they make excellent partners in that because of the mindset that librarians hold. So they're typically collaborative and non-competitive. They believe in a culture of colleagues raising each other up, and they embrace a growth mindset, right? And all of this translates well into faculty development. So librarians, as from the nature of our work, particularly subject librarians, often have skills even if they haven't had classroom experience, right? In terms of it, because I think that's as I was getting ready for this topic, I was thinking like what it would be like to be a brand new librarian and standing in front of faculty, explaining to them how they should do their teaching, right? Like that could be a little scary in terms of it. As you can see from my bio, I've been teaching for a long time, so I didn't have a problem with it, but I do think that a lot of the people who do faculty development have a background in classroom teaching. But I do think anyone can do it in terms of it. So that's kind of how we focus on it. Now, what the literature doesn't really talk about is what makes a good train the trainer. And here are my ideas on that. So, an understanding of the needs of expectations of the faculty. In a train the trainer environment, using the peers, the colleagues' experiences of each other is really important. So like making sure that there's opportunities for faculty to talk to each other and to learn from each other is really important in faculty development because it's definitely not a sage on the stage situation. Tools for faculty members to continue exploring. So giving people a lot of avenues for understanding, particularly things like information literacy theories, I think are important so they know where we're coming from. And then also having the right information at the right time. So making sure they have we specifically did our train the trainers a week before classes start because that's when they're finishing up their classroom activities after they've finished their syllabus. So like now is when they're thinking about that sort of tactical question, right? I'm going to lean on my own paper a little bit because I did this paper a couple of years ago about why people request library-led information literacy support. We did some interviews, and I thought this is kind of helpful for understanding where faculty are at in information literacy, right? Just so that you have an understanding of like why they asked librarians to come to their classes in the first place so that and I felt like this is a paper I did right before I started the train the trainer around the same time and it really affected how I planned the train the trainer that I did. So that's the paper itself. So we asked first about whether their library knowledge at various times of their career in terms of it. And what we generally found is undergrad, well, particularly in terms of it, like overall faculty felt like they were not very knowledgeable, particularly as undergraduates. And when they talked about experiences that they had with the library, it was a lot of study space in terms of their experience of the library. So just to say that, like, we had one thesis like, oh, they're trying to recreate a really great librarian experience. And some of them are, but a lot of them are trying to deal with the gap that they had when they were a student. So that's something that's important to them, particularly about library knowledge and skills in terms of it. And now I have some quotes from that, the study in terms of it. So here's one. I'm not the student I am today. I think a lot of people say it, but I mean it. The most I recall from undergrad was that I was very hunt and peck and find on my own. I would physically walk in and start looking around the physical objects of the library. Searching was very hit or miss, very physical, very find what you could with the resources available. So like this is the background they have with the library, right? As students in terms of it. And then when I got my dissertation with my PhD, the level of research and strategy got much more in depth, and I was working with each other as peers. So this is important. The peer part is really important to faculty and information literacy, to find the best materials. But even as a PhD, I didn't fully understand. And then I love this. So I put this long quote in terms of it, but specifically, I'll just read the first part. I didn't come from a long line of people exposed to scholarship. I was talking to my mom and she said, now you sound like a professor. Our students come from all backgrounds, and I think it's important to do a little instruction or hand holding. And because we don't know who has the experience and confidence with how you engage research, those students who had instruction will continue to do well. And those students who haven't had it, they're a little bit of closer to hand holding, towards being a little bit closer to being a scholarly type person. But a lot of them have put to figure it out. I just like this because it shows like an element of student support that is also involved with like library use and information literacy, right? So that's why like they have someone come to their physical classroom, right? And that's maybe why they want to cover information literacy, right? I don't know. These are kind of helpful for how we did it. Some other things that they talked about are critical reading. So, in the sense of analysis, um, someday you need to be an expert, but until then you need to find experts. So the focus of expertise is part of what people like about library and interaction, right? And so that sort of expertise is also what they might be trying to get from a train the trainer, right? And then extremely great for a student's second a voice of authority. I love it when librarians come in. So that sort of stuff is also important. So talking a little bit more about this like idea of multiple people in the room, right? So when we did topics for kind of train the trainer was also related to kind of some of the topics that I've talked about a little bit is we did a lot for all of our train the trainers. We did a little what we're seeing from your students. So this can be information that you glean from a reference desk or from your own experience working with it. But faculty found this really helpful, actually, to be like, this is where we see them having problems with these assignments. So that could be from consultations. That could be, it's sort of an interesting assessment in terms of it is like, this is what they have trouble with. And related to that, also, we often did an activity of where do you see the issues for your students and research support. And that's interesting because they would often find all different points, which kind of, I think, helps explain maybe the disconnect sometimes. We often did like what the literature says on information literacy. So introducing people to the idea of what information literacy is. Um, we did a real emphasis on the literature that says that multiple interventions, so multiple smaller information literacy things are often better than like a single intervention, which I think was helpful. Obviously, going through something like the ACRL framework is a really useful tool as well. So getting an idea for like, what is it that we talk about when we talk about information literacy? For my business librarians in there, this also included a crash course in business reference. Our instructors, come from, we have poets that teach classes. We have elected officials that teach classes. We have, um, We have priests that teach classes. They just don't have a background in business research. And so often talking about like what types of databases exist out there and what we recommend, particularly for each case they're doing, but also just in general for what is good or bad to see from that and how to cite the sources and stuff like that. So when we did it, we had a lot of disciplinary information because that was also what we used to be covering in that C104 instructor thing was a little bit about how to find the business databases and what that looked like. We often had like a breaking down of what the semester's case is. Uh, the faculty found this helpful because they've just started thinking about it too. So having more of a conversation of where we think students are going to have problems with this particular one was also nice because it sort of eliminated some of the need for the videos. Um, we've gotten informal feedback that people were using our videos also to break down the case as instructors, and this gave us a chance to like do that in person versus like making a video of the topic, right? We also talked about in this later one, managing research processes as a group. What this looked like is actually the winners of the case that we did. We interviewed them to see how they did their work, and we kind of presented that to all the instructors. And we also integrated a couple of different things about emotional safety and stuff like that in terms of particularly as students are um, as they're researching things and they're coming up with where their ideas might be wrong or slightly incorrect and they're having conversations about it. And that was really helpful since this was a very group-based class. Something that I think is really helpful and is something that's really helpful is every single time we did this train the trainer, we asked 2 to 4 instructors to present about assignments that we'd either directly created with them or how they approach different things. So we had people approaching like how they talk about, I had one instructor who talked about verbal citation. So how they talk about verbally citing resources in terms of it and the metaphors that they use for that. We had another instructor, I'm not a fan of a scavenger hunt, but she had a scavenger hunt that she was very proud of. And I think was like towards information literacy. And so she talked about why she liked that particular scavenger hunt and how she did her work. Um, we also have had in the past like activities involving ChatGPT and things like that. So how they're using ChatGPT in collaboration for research assignments. So we've had instructors use ChatGPT for the as they're starting to think about researching a topic, like better understanding what their assumptions are in terms of those things. And sometimes a back and forth with like ChatGPT can be helpful in terms of it. So yeah, we had instructors present to each other, and I think that was really a big secret sauce of doing this because they were a lot more engaged in it, and it also increased the buy-in because oftentimes they were activities that we did together. And so then they understood, oh, like like this is something that we can work with Alana and Gary with and stuff like that. So I think that peer support or even short presentations by faculty that you work with already can be really helpful as part of a training activity for a department. So best practices for implementing, like I said, the importance of peer support. So having people really supporting each other as teaching, explaining the why of why we do. This is a lot of like, why do we teach in this specific way? Like, why do we do active learning activities? Like that sort of stuff. The explaining the why of what we do as librarians is important, and then giving people a lot of options for discussions. This is also an opportunity, at least in our case, for these 20 some instructors to get to know each other and on a different topic. And so a lot of times they would veer off into other things or other assignments or stuff like that. And I think that's part of like building a community, right? About IL is important as well. So assessment in terms of it. So one session we had 25 instructors attend. So we've actually only done this 4 times in terms of it. So these are 2 hour sessions in terms of it. So one of the sessions, the one collectively for both instructors, the group work one, had 25 instructors there. which means collectively they taught 25 sections of 25 each. So theoretically, we avoided 100 one-shots by presenting to that group, right? In terms of it. So it required a little bit more upkeep, a little bit more thinking through, but that 2 hours saved us a phenomenal amount of work in terms of how we focused in it and in terms of it. And then this is some of the assessment we've gotten because we did kind of like a Qualtrics survey, and that I thought the session was useful and informative. I love the collegial atmosphere Alana and Gary promote. Thank you for developing such an applicable presentation for us. I'm already retooling my content, which for my team development content. So this is when we did the group work one. And then what a wonderful training, organized and clear. So they really appreciated some time with the librarians to talk about how they're doing their assignment. So yeah, this is just to say, like, we did some assessment in terms of it, and people were like, great, sounds great. So things I like about Train the Trainer, and definitely planning to do it again, particularly for these classes in which we might go into one section of the class, but we don't have the capacity to go into all the sections, right? So whenever you have a class with, let's just say, over 15 sections, the chances that you're ever going to professionally scale to that class are low, right? So sometimes the Train the Trainer seems like a really great opportunity. It also uses librarian expertise in a new way. So it allows us to literally interact with, it's less transactive as a relationship with instructors. So I feel like this has changed our relationship with the instructors, in which it's less like, you come to my class on this day. It's more like, you have expertise and I am borrowing some of it in terms of it. And then for us, like I said, this Train the Trainer particularly takes less time than going into those classes, but still allows us to really have a relationship with some of the largest classes on campus that is sustainable, right? And I know that, myself included, I really want to be involved in required courses because they touch all the students on campus, but I also don't have the staffing to be involved in required courses. So this allows us to sort of meet them midway in terms of it. So drawbacks of Train the Trainer, faculty turnover. And so every couple of years, there's going to be a continual need for more buy-in in terms of this group, right? So sometimes you invest in faculty development. I know because I was at Purdue University, which has the impact program, which is another faculty development. And oftentimes you do course transformation multiple times because the instructor would change and then they'd have different ideas, right? Continual need for buy-in. This is something we used to say. So I was at Purdue University before, and I learned it from an electrical engineer, and I still love it, which is deans can't read, but they can count. And I love that term because I find that as much as at our height, at our high water mark, we were doing something like 400 one-shots a year, my department was. And that was bananas unsustainable, but also like our dean sort of loved it, like in terms of like, oh, look at how much interaction we're having with the classes. And it's harder to explain, like, oh, we are influencing the instructors, right? It just it doesn't have that same, oh, you've been meeting so many, you're in so many different classes, right? It just doesn't have the same meaning sometimes to administrators in terms of it. Not to say that we don't have assessment, but also assessment is much harder, right? Is because we're affecting people who affect people. Like there's a second order effect. And then there are changes in the class. So an example of that is, so we did this whole thing about group work 2 years ago, and there's still a lot of group work in the class, but one thing that happens inside the department that we work with is a real all-out battle against grade inflation in terms of it. So like they don't want people to have inflated grades, and one of the ways that they have dealt with grade inflation is they have less group projects, because when you evaluate students individually, um you have more like you have more difference, like more variability in grades, right? In terms of it. So some of the assignments that were group work are no longer group work. And so in some ways, some of the stuff that we taught is like not applicable to like the current environment in the same way. So that stuff can happen too, as well as like cases change and stuff like that. Um, so some thoughts on further implementation for other disciplinary information literacy. So outside of business, some thoughts I had in terms of it is what types of things do subject specialists need to go before pursuing train the trainer opportunities? In what ways are librarians underprepared? So something like I said is I've taught credit bearing courses. My colleague Gary Arvey also has taught credit bearing courses. We're very comfortable, like I said, being in front of faculty. And I think it's important to note that not everybody, maybe instruction librarians, but not everyone would feel comfortable, and there might be some real power imbalances in that sort of environment. So thinking about that is something that I'm thinking about, like, well, what do instructors need in terms of it? They may also not be active in faculty development writ large in terms of it. So they may not all, they may not have the language in terms of it. And then our example is too small compared to full scale faculty development. So what I kind of meant by this is like, so we just did essentially two classes with multiple instructors, right? In terms of it. And a lot of faculty development is curriculum wide in terms of it. So I do wonder if the needs are different or if there is benefit with like doing it more on the like more of the campus wide level, right? Which is what oftentimes a lot of you guys who are instruction librarians or head of curriculum is what you do as well. So I wonder about like the mix of experiences or allocation, right? And then how do we know or do we know or not know about faculty development and motivation for curriculum integration? So I think in many ways, this train the trainer changes the relationship that we have with the instructors. And so I feel as if as a profession, we need to like know more about what influences faculty's creation of courses or like, curriculum decisions, so that we can be like really effective in terms of it. In the same way that we know a lot about students' information seeking behavior and we build one shots around that information, right? But we don't know as much about like what motivates a faculty to like adopt a flipped model classroom or to add additional activities that are more student centered, like what leads to those decisions, right? And how does that integrate with, and then it's also what would motivate them to integrate information literacy, right? I imagine that the answer is like, if they show up, they'll do it. But I also think that there's a possibility similar to one shots where some ways of doing one shots are sometimes more effective than others, right? So that's a little bit about that. And then here's my works cited. A couple of different things. Jane Hammond's, she has a new book out too about faculty developers, and there's some competency information in terms of it. And here's a link to my article as well about faculty motivations. So, right, stop share. So that's a little bit about where I was sort of going in terms of it. And so now I'm going to kind of pause and see if there's any questions or ideas or topics that people would be interested in this topic.
Yeah, this is Jennifer from UK. One of the things that strikes me here is that and Valerie is here too from UK, is that we do a lot of work with DSW students who are doing a systematic review.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah.
and we just spend an inordinate amount of time, especially in the summer, doing one-on-one consultations. And we've added a Canvas module, and we keep adding to the module and making it a requirement and all these other things. And it just seems to me that if we could get in and even just a one-time thing with all the instructors of the 8 million sections to talk about, if nothing else, the problems they're having, what they're not understanding, show them the databases that that we're teaching them, that we could maybe avoid the confusion we get when the instructors are telling them one thing and we're telling them another, especially about what a systematic review is and how you do it.
Yeah, I love it. And that reminds me of also one of the things we've used Train the Trainer as well is to explain to all the faculty as a group um why they shouldn't require consultations for all their classes is what like just giving them a numbers idea of like
Mhm.
what that looks like for us. And because they're not all of them, but allowing them to train the trainer gave us a place to really peer pressure them about like not doing that. um but yeah, and that DSW, particularly for systematic review, yeah, I think train the trainer might, especially since they might have disciplinary backgrounds that help them understand it. But yeah, just explaining as a group, here's what we're seeing from your students, here's where they're getting hung up on this. I mean, might save you. And then also, like, here's how to properly prepare them when they come and see you, right?
Mhm.
Would be also helpful, you know? Because we also have really in the past 4 years dealt with a real problem with, oh, you guys are amazing. I want my students to always interact with you. And then you're like, "Ah, no, your class is so huge. We can't do it." And so yeah, I think that's always a hem and haw. It's like when you explain that, they're like, great, this is, like I'm definitely gonna have my students consult with you now. And then you're like, no, this is not what I want you to do. Right. That's not really sustainable. I guess. Has anyone done kind of a train the trainer or like worked with instructors or focused on it? Valerie, I saw you come on to camera. I didn't know if you had a question.
I was just trying to be more engaged in the conversation. I thought instead of a name across. But actually, as I was doing that, I heard your question, and I have had a biology entry level required course for all majors for some years. Is supposed to be train the trainer, and we have, you know, um, anywhere from 20 to 35 sections, and but it's taught by GAs, and so that is particularly, I mean, TAs, that's particularly challenging because there's so much turnover. And so this year, we did go to, instead of me trying to, I would meet with, like you, I would meet with the newest ones classes,
Mhm.
but not all of them. But this year, I created videos that they played. I didn't like how the course coordinator, ended up playing them at double speed. Uh, um, but I do like that the technology now can allow someone to adjust the speed. And so, what my boss and I went back and talked to them about was, okay, if single speed is too slow for most students, although we do have some international students and different kinds of learners, one and a half or one and a quarter speed. Um, but I think it has saved a lot. It's just not going to work for everybody. And who I worry about are the students that have learning issues. Sometimes, at least in your model, it's professors rather than TAs. But the reason I wanted to mention this is it's adaptable even in STEM. A lot of times, STEM librarians think, how in the world can I get in the classroom? And I just got lucky early on and have been part of this for over 10 years. But it can be, I think it's doable for any discipline.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point about turnover, particularly. Like I said, these were um they're all like at lecture level, but they're full time. So like there was much less turnover in this particular group. But I do like the idea of doing like a video. I was thinking about last week, we had a new instructor come in and we actually sent them to the LibGuide for our train the trainer, and they watched the recording of the previous one. And so I think that there's something to be said for like videos of information, so that you don't have to get all the instructors in the room to do that, because that can oftentimes, especially if they're TAs, could be like a real headache, right? To get them all together, especially, they're all different skill sets or topics, right? And towards your point about STEM, I think it really is. Yeah, particularly since STEM librarians have subject expertise, they probably can speak the language of that department really well to be like, oh, like here's some information that can help you to do that work in terms of it.
So I know that you and your colleague were kind of in this together within like your subject area. Would you have any advice for trying to spread something like this among other librarians in other subject areas within your library?
That's a great question because obviously like we were in this situation where we were solving a specific problem and we were inside of our areas, but we haven't really like shopped it out to a lot of other instructors in terms of it. I think it I think one thing that I think would be helpful is like focusing on the idea of like required courses. Like I think in general, librarians, particularly instruction librarians, would like to be involved in required courses, and it's hard to be involved in a required course if it's required. So there's so many students involved in it, right? So I think in that way it could be helpful. I also think so. I also oversee the education library and the sciences library. And I do think that this is something that could probably be helpful to those groups as well. I think about my colleagues in education particularly are already doing the train the trainer because they're teaching teachers, right? So in many ways they would understand the concept of faculty development, if that's the term that you ended up using even more in terms of it. So I think that there's possibilities of it. Um, I think it really depends on like what the goals are of the classes in terms of it. And so I know a lot of people, so here in our library, we're really focused on these really giant courses and we have this existing relationship, but a lot of people have more relationships with really small courses. And so this wouldn't really help you with like we were talking about history, right? History honors theses, for example. Like that would be really hard to do a train the trainer on since everybody's in a different boat, right? Um, so though you probably could do it. I don't know. I think that that's my thought in terms of it. What are you kind of thinking in terms of it, Kayla? Like, how would you kind of talk about it?
So the way we're structured, we have like a team of instruction librarians, and each of us has our own area. Um, and we could just individually decide to take something like this on. Um, but like my fear would be a colleague's talking to someone across campus, like, oh, this is how my librarian is doing it. But if the librarian for another area is like, absolutely not, I don't think that's right. Like, how do we marry that and how do we fit that all together? So that was just kind of what I was wondering was like how to have a team approach, kind of the way we're
Right.
structured.
No, that's a really great point in terms of it, especially because like one thing we have run into is like, oh, I heard you went into like this other class, but we're not coming into your class. And that can be a
Yeah.
little bit of a weird interaction because it could also just be the same instructor. Like we're happy to go into your X section, but we're not going to
Yes.
go into your Y section.
And we've had
Uh,
that. Yeah.
yeah, where you've been there. And I think that's hard in terms of it. And I do think this equity argument can help you in that case. I do also, there's something that you said there about across different disciplines
Yeah.
or topics. Yeah, I think that there's some folks who won't see this as like a good use of their time, or maybe they just don't feel comfortable training it. Oh, I had another thought, which is if you're a team environment, I mean, the literature, which is mostly instructional librarians who are course coordinators, really talk about partnering with faculty development offices, so like teaching and learning departments. And that could be another way that your team could go is like offering a workshop and inviting multiple librarians to kind of talk about it or be in that space and see like similar doing the what we're seeing from your students or what we're seeing
Mhm.
from students in general, and then tailoring it a little bit is like another way you could do this if you have like a existing faculty development workshop thing that you're involved in. So it could be like a good example. And like I said, most of the literature is people who have built that relationship. This is obviously like not kind of what we've done over in business SPIA, but I do think that if you're particularly cross campus in terms of your focus as a team, like that might be a better solution, you know?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other, you can also put your questions in chat. I'll read them. Unmute if you have anything.
Yeah.
I have a comment and a bit of a question. Hi, this is Amy. So I love this model because I think you can reach a whole lot of people with fewer staff. But I want you to talk about, if you can, a little bit more about evaluation because when I do the one shots, I get these surveys back. I do the ALA project outcome surveys, and you get this like rich, open-ended answers about your instruction sessions, um, and then numbers to show leadership, like how well you're doing, how the students are saying that they're going to remember everything that you said and use it every day. Um, so what kind of evaluation could you do? Could you ask faculty to kind of compare like before the train the trainer and then after the trainer? Could you talk a little bit more about what you do to measure your impact?
Yeah, I mean, so we haven't done anything like that in terms of it. I'm trying to think of what assessment would look like. Because yeah, I agree. Like if you get those like individual student back, like those would be like awesome in terms of it. Um, I do think so one benefit of being at the faculty level that I could see. So I haven't done this because I think in this case we haven't really gotten a lot of pushback in terms of it, though I will say I'm trying to make a rationale for a library renovation right now, and I do kind of miss the like lots and lots of instruction to be like we're all over the curriculum, right? Um, I think one thing is like I feel as if with this group, and we have done this a little bit, is you could have a required assignment on like how information literacy content has been indicated, which would give you I feel like if you have this relationship with the instructors where they're getting something out of it, you would have the ability to do a required assignment or a required survey that would explain like how, because I'm kind of in both situations where like I agree like some of what I do when I do this is about like library use versus like information literacy, right? So like so maybe like towards that like this led me to understand the library deeper or this under you know like you could get that sort of stuff versus like I understand information better, which I don't think would help you as much in those convos, right? So yeah, I think that that's one benefit, and I have implemented a couple of different things with these classes since this, you know, for various different research projects. But I agree, it's much harder because there isn't that interchange where you're in front and they understand they're receiving content from a different department, right? And actually, I will say that at IU in general, we've struggled with that in that we've done an assignment that's inside of our biology department that is enormously successful that we did 15 years ago, and they're still using the assignment, but librarians are no longer involved in the class, right? And so it's like hard to measure because we haven't done anything, but they're still using that same assignment. And it becomes
That's
kind of
awesome.
like, yeah, like we've had lots of conversations about like what that means or how can we like benefit from that in terms of it. But I think you make a really good point, which is because you have these individual surveys, you have a lot more of that anecdotal stuff, which I think is really important. So yeah, you do lose. Yeah, and I just to say I haven't really figured out like a way to describe this besides just explaining how much less work we have to do. Um, that really gels in terms of it. And I feel like another thing I'm thinking aloud in terms of it, because like I said, we have is also getting those faculty testimonials, I think is also would be helpful. Which is possibly they would see that a little bit more than before, perhaps.
For sure. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Those are great. Yeah, this is great in terms of it. And it's not, if I haven't said before, it's great to talk to you guys about it because like I have thought about it and done it, but not really like we said, really thought through this assessment piece. So this is really interesting to me, actually. Valerie, go ahead. Go ahead.
Um, I don't know if this will be applicable or not to what she was asking, but I know that in one class that a team taught, the instructor included a question about, it was actually when we were in a one shot, but I don't think it has to be, included a question in their own survey of the students for feedback on how the semester went, to improve their own teaching. They asked, and much to our surprise, the part I taught was EndNote. They said they loved the EndNote handout. Who knew? Um, and so more than one student. And I'm thinking that something that might be more easily implemented is a conversation with that instructor earlier in the semester about designing a question together to add on about that class, if that's possible, or it may help them think that getting some feedback about their own teaching would be helpful too.
Thank you all. This has been absolutely wonderful. The clock tower right outside my window is about to chime and tell us it's 11 o'clock. There it goes. Can you hear it? All right.